A few weeks ago, we released a video titled 5 locations in Fallout 4 that should have been settlement sites, where we detailed locations that would have made excellent settlement spots if Toddy McCanvasbag had only given us the chance. It's not that the 37 locations we were handed just weren't enough, it was just that some of the sites we were given, like Coastal Cottage and Somerville Place, were absolute Brahmin ploppies, while other in-game locations could have made far more sense as settlement sites, and we simply never got the option to build there. As it turns out, limiting ourselves to 5 locations may have been a bit too restrictive, because the folks in the comments had no shortage of sites we either overlooked or were simply bumped because there just wasn't any room left. So that's why today I'm going to go ahead and give you a voice by listing 5 locations in Fallout 4 that should have been settlement sites, commenter edition. Oh, and just in case you were worried, we're not just going to list the locations from people who agreed with our list. How messed up would that be if I just released the same video twice and said, well, most people in the comments agreed with me? Wait, damn, that would have required a lot less work. Oh well, too late now. Go ahead and find a mattress that doesn't have too many unidentifiable stains on it and heat up a can of pork and beans as we get started with number 5. Oh, and also these aren't in any particular order, so don't get mad. I touched on Breakheart Banks in my ranking all settlements video, stating that it would have been much better than the Green Top Nursery that sits directly across the road that we are allowed to build at, and it seems many in the Grey Gaming community feel the same, as this was one that was brought up a lot in the comments. Breakheart Banks is a small corn and melon farm built over a roadside rest stop and had the potential to become a bustling farming community and staging point for any caravans heading north out of the Commonwealth. They even had some automated turret defenses and a guard post overlooking the road. It had the potential, that is, until super mutants rolled in, and you can probably guess what they did after that. The settlement is actually pretty close to what you would expect from a roadside rest stop. There's a small parking lot, a grassy dirt patch that probably used to serve as a lawn, a few scattered trees, of course there's the toilets, and some utility boxes farther from the road that likely provided power and septic services for the stop. Breakheart Banks has the potential to be a now we're getting somewhere tier location. Not the best out there, but still a fun place to experiment with and build at. The terrain is fairly challenging, mostly consisting of rolling hills, with the driveway forming a small canyon, which would be super fun to stage traps and turrets overlooking it, assuming that, you know, the road is where enemy spawn points were placed. The biggest things that we beggars being choosers would have to insist on would likely be that the shack built over the bathrooms be scrappable, and we all know how much stock Bethesda put into basic quality of life features like that now, don't we? Still, even if we can't get rid of the eyesore shack, there's still plenty of potential for Breakheart Banks so long as the buildable area encompasses all of the super mutant structures, extends at least to the edge of the main roadway, and contains a ceiling more than a few stories tall. West Everett Estates is a suburb outside Malden that was still in the process of being constructed when the bombs fell. The sanctuary-style buildings fared just as well as its North Concord counterpart, with most buildings still standing and intact enough that you could probably put someone up in them again if you cleared the area, though just like Sanctuary, they probably wouldn't be very happy about it in the real world. What really separates West Everett Estates apart from Sanctuary, though, is its heavy fortifications. Some of the residents here had the forethought to build bomb shelters and managed to not only survive the initial blasts of the Great War, but were also able to outlast the harshest periods of radioactivity. And though the surviving families were suspicious of each other after the blast due to some of their other neighbors going full raider on them, they did form an uneasy alliance and managed to steal some trucks that weren't knocked out by the EMPs and used them to almost completely wall off the settlement, similarly to how we see Big Town in Fallout 3. Everything went well for a time, but this being a Fallout game, depending on who you ask anyway, the settlement eventually fell to raiders. By the time we encounter West Everett Estates, 209-ish years later, it has changed hands once again to a band of super mutants. Clearing the estates can be a tough fight, so it might be a task better suited to later playthroughs. Although it seems like a watered down and simplified Sanctuary Hills, it does actually bring quite a bit of character to the mix. If it were made open to settling, it would be the only settlement that possesses a standing water tower within its borders. And it could have made an okay Sturgis, Ingram, or Tinker Tom quest to have them repair the tower in order to provide additional water to whatever faction you've decided to side with. Another massive opportunity that I think was missed was the fact that the West Everett Estates is directly across the river from Taffington Boathouse. This could add a lot of in-game world building, like the two settlements together form the basis for a ferry crossing, or the two workshops could be linked like the 4 workshops in Vault 88 for instance, then you could actually build a bridge across the river. I'm actually kind of bummed now because for the past several weeks I've been wanting to do an episode of the Commonwealth Contractor on how to build a barn bridge. But I haven't done this because there's not a single settlement in the entire game that occupies both banks of a river, stream, or canyon, so a covered bridge would have no actual practical application. Damn you, Todd. There was just so much backstory, creative potential, and world building potential here, and Bethesda absolutely wasted it. But with that said, even if they had allowed us to, knowing Bethesda, they probably wouldn't have allowed us to scrap any of the meat bags or super mutant cages laying around, so it probably wouldn't have any use beyond a disciples den for Nuka World playthroughs, even if they did. I had considered Eden Meadow Cinemas for my earlier list, but ultimately decided against it because it was basically Starlight Drive-In on steroids. While I personally will probably always place Starlight at the top of any settlement ranking list, I do acknowledge that its enormous size can be daunting for many players. To that point, EMC is 2 Starlight Drive-Ins stacked end to end. There is a ton that makes this a tantalizing mega settlement site, and honestly, if it was handled properly, I think I would have much rather been able to settle here than just down the road at Echo Lake Lumber Mill. The 2 screen houses are in more or less the same condition as the one at Starlight, but the double projector house is completely intact, unlike the one at Starlight that has a collapsed canopy on one side of the concession stand. It's also on top of a hill instead of located at the base of one, so there's actually already a low wall in places where they had to build up and level up the site, so you already have a basis for defensive structures and wall builds. One thing that's cool about EMC, but at the same time would make it a poor choice for settling, is the fact that the projectors both still work, just only one at a time, allowing you to catch glimpses of the Night of the Fishman's Revenge or the Fighting Furies' last stand at Fort McGee. However, you can't actually shut either of these off, so you're stuck dealing with the sounds of gunshots and western music or the shrill screams of a 40s style horror flick, 24 hours a day. If they did make this site open to settling, I would have to insist on being able to turn the projectors off. Another cool thing it would have been nice to be able to do would be to build a new projector screen or repair the existing ones and use the unscrappable rolls of film from Starlight Drive-In to repair some of the missing sections of these films, allowing you to actually sit around and watch a movie with the rest of your settlers, which I would totally do if we had the option. There's a lot of potential here, but I admit it would be a colossal undertaking to build anything meaningful here, and there's a lot of room for Bethesda to screw it up. Speaking of screwing things up, I just wanted to offer a friendly reminder that if you're enjoying the video, a like would be appreciated, as user engagement is a metric we use to determine the sort of content that provides the most value to you, a random person on the internet who has the power to choose whether I can afford to splurge on a can of cram for dinner or if I have to cheap out on a tin of Lakowski's potted meat again. You know what that stuff does to your insides. Anyway, on with our list. So the comments often suggested a large number of vague and grandiose settlements, usually large collections of sites rather than any one location. Make all of the Overpass Gunner Outpost settlements, make all the Red Rocket settlements, make all of the Vault settlements. That's simply not feasible, and while we do like to complain bitterly about the missed opportunities in Fallout 4 here, I always at least try to keep my solutions within the realm of they probably could have addressed this if they approached it differently during the design phase, or if they just pushed publishing out a few weeks. There was one location that was suggested a few times that makes the "I like vaults" comments a little more viable, and that is the campsite outside Vault 81. The vault itself is pretty gigantic already and much cleaner than what we can do even with the Vault Tech Workshop DLC, unless you're counting the sealed off section of the vault, which that one might be a bit too much of a pain to actually work with. So I wouldn't really want to be able to fudge with Vault 81 itself, but the small area outside of Vault 81 is actually sort of perfectly suited to the settlement building mechanic and the storytelling that the Minutemen try to bring to the table here. The area is not very big and the terrain is trash for the most part, but think about Vault 81 from a lore perspective. The Vault 81 population is struggling to keep it running, with everyone working long shifts and Trader Riley barely making a dent in their required materials list. Imagine if there was a settlement directly outside their front door that could serve as a trade hub, a settlement that is plainly visible that would attract traders, and not far from the main railroad means it would have easy access to Oberlin Station, Egret Tours Marina, and Grey Garden. An ambassador program between the outside settlement and the vault dwellers inside could allow the vault dwellers to requisition certain materials and the outside traders to keep their eyes open and serve as middlemen between the insular vault dwellers and the traders. In exchange, the vault could offer educational materials, water and food, perhaps medical checkups to their outside neighbors, while the settlement outside could add another layer of defense against attacks. It's not a perfect symbiotic relationship, but it's probably the best that Overseer McNamara and a prospective of Wasteland Mayor could hope for given their current circumstances. The settlement location itself is pretty meh, but the world building it would add rather than just another place to spend 20 hours building for no actual in-game payoff would be a nice change of pace over most existing settlement sites. General Atomic's Galleria is an interesting location to consider. It's actually quite similar to other settlement locations we did end up getting in the base game. It's a mostly walled-off settlement filled with largely intact buildings, unlocked through a pretty basic but still decently intriguing quest, reminiscent of Covenant. It is of course populated with Mr. Handy still going about their day-to-day business as programmed before the Great War, much like the Handys we see at Grey Garden. But the Galleria is just so much better executed than either of said equivalents. The buildings are large, easily cleared and repurposed. If you want to keep the bots, there's a pathway that lets you finish your dealings with them in a way that doesn't require you to destroy them and stops them from accidentally killing innocent settlers. If you don't want the bots around, dragging down your settlement happiness ratings, then the game gives you plenty of chances to destroy them with your actions being completely justified, rather than, these bots have done nothing to me but I don't like them so I'm blasting them. It just offers a much cleaner headcanon story than Grey Garden. As I already said, the buildings can easily be repurposed, but the settlement itself could easily be fortified, and you could do everything from a Bunker Hill-esque trading hub to a Citadel-style military fortress. There's not a lot of opportunity for building new structures, as the giant Mr. Handy in the middle of the courtyard really cramps the workspace we have available, but what you do get to work with is so much better than the tiny pre-war homes in Covenant. There were other locations that I was seriously wanting to include here, but they sort of broke the top 5 format, and who the hell got anywhere by doing top 7 lists? Well, shit. Anyway, I'm sure I can easily do a commenter edition episode 2 if you're interested. I won't even complain about it. I'm sort of digging this style of content at the moment. So let us know in the comments whether these were ones you actually suggested, whether you would like to build at any of these sites, or whether there's another location you would like showcased in a 3rd episode. That said, I'm all out of things to say, so until next time, stay safe, and we hope to see you here next time on Grey Gaming.